as we have more and more people joining us, I'd just like to say thank you all for coming and welcome to our session here today, the Tech Resume Review session organized by techNL for our student members as well as our job seekers who are interested in the tech sector. My name is Flanagan. I'm a program manager with Ready Talent today, and my only job today here is to facilitate conversation from our experts. We have three fantastic people who work in recruitment in tech today in Newfoundland and Labrador who are experts in just knowing what sorts of resumes and individuals are valuable to tech companies, technical teams, CTOs, and more. They've seen a lot of individuals join their teams. They've been part of recruitment events, and of course, they've reviewed a lot of resumes in their time, as many of us in the tech sector can say we have. But we really wanted to organize this event for Hoff and Madison specifically, wanted to create an event that gave you folks an opportunity to have your resumes critiqued in real time, anonymously by folks in the sector. So that's just what we're going to do. And that's enough for me. So I will quickly give a brief rundown of our panelists, and then I would love for them to give us some more information about who they are. First, we have Elyse Summers, a customer success manager with ClearRisk, as well as working in the operations and HR space. So thank you for coming, Elyse. Next, we have Ellie Jackson, who's a manager, people and culture with Carnegie Learning. Again, amongst other things, I think that everyone wears many hats with their employers. And finally, we have Tessa Whelan, senior recruiter at CoLab Software. So I just went around the room very briefly and said people's names and titles, but now we'd like to start hearing from you folks. Elyse, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself first?
Thanks for having me, everybody. I will start by saying I'm probably the least expert on this panel, and that's okay, because where my expertise comes in is a lot of companies at all different sizes go through someone like me who looks at a resume, who's not technical, who's just been given the task. So that's my brain that's going to come into this. So yes, I am a customer success manager, but I also do operations here at ClearRisk.
Amazing, Elyse. Thank you so much. And don't undercut yourself. You know, it's important to have that mindset. And I think all of us who are on sort of the HR side of tech, it can feel like we don't know what we're talking about, but I promise you folks who are here with us today, we're very involved in the hiring process, and we know more than you think about the technical roles required in our companies. So thank you, Elyse. Next, I'll throw it to Ellie. Ellie, do you want to provide a little bit more information about yourself?
Sure. Very happy to be here. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this. So like Liam said, I'm the manager of people and culture here with Carnegie Learning in Canada. We're an education tech company. And our Canadian headquarters is in St. John's. Our US headquarters is in Pittsburgh. So here locally within Canada, we have about 50 staff. And I have seen a lot of resumes in my time. So previous to my role with Carnegie, I worked in the construction industry where I was an HR advisor, and I focused mainly on recruitment. So reviewing resumes, interviewing, all of that good stuff is really within my wheelhouse. And yeah, it's certainly something that it takes a little bit of an art when you're applying for things. I was very excited when I was asked to be part of the panel today, because hopefully we'll all be able to provide a little bit of insight into that process and about resumes overall. So excited to be here, and thank you.
Amazing, Ellie. And a bit of difference between tech resumes and construction resumes, I imagine, in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, very much so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, amazing. Well, we'll dive into some of those, I'm sure. I'm sure there's some very techy resumes in our pile today that we've selected. We won't be able to look at everyone's resumes who submitted, but we have a solid number to get through today. Next up, of course, Tessa. Last but not least, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for asking me to be a part of this, Liam. I was super excited. I'm the senior recruiter at CoLab, so a big chunk of what I do is look at resumes and LinkedIn profiles all day, every day. So CoLab is an engineering software local startup. So we have grown. When I started, we had, I think it was like 55 people, and now we have nearly 85. So we've grown quite a bit in the last year. And of course, I've been involved in every single person's application process, and lots of other resumes that come with that. Before CoLab, I was at a different Vancouver-based startup, also in the tech industry. And prior to that, I was in healthcare. So definitely have seen a lot of different resumes throughout the years, and feel like maybe my advice can be valuable to somebody.
Amazing, Tess. I'm sure it will be. And I'm very glad you mentioned LinkedIn, because that's what you folks check as well. LinkedIn's extensions of the resume, right, folks? I'm not over here. Okay, perfect. So we're reviewing resumes today. Maybe we'll do a LinkedIn one in the future. Who can say if this goes well and everyone enjoys it? We actually had a question in the chat already from Arvind asking about if we're reviewing non-tech support roles resumes today. I think Arvind means software development. We're focused on software developer for today. I believe that's what the majority of the resumes we received are. But I think there's going to be valuable advice for everybody writing their resume moving forward. So with all that said, panelists, are you ready to get into this? Amazing. Okay, one panelist is assigned as the lead for each resume. They will start things off with some thoughts before we get some thoughts from the entire panel. I believe our first resume is from Elyse. Could we have the resume shared? Amazing, Madison. Thank you so much. Okay, we have resume number 1 redacted. And maybe, Madison, we could zoom in a little bit just so we can get some, we can see sort of the format here, but if we get to more of a window width, we should be able to read it. There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Elyse, what are your thoughts on this resume?
Do I have the ability to like point at it so people can see what I'm pointing at? That's cool.
I'm not sure. Sometimes there's an option to annotate.
Don't necessarily need it. I just thought of it. But yeah, so this was number 1. I also have it over on this screen if I look at it here closer. So a few things that stuck out to me for this one is love the length. It's a page. 1 to 2 pages, love. Anything over that tends to, you're just scrolling. I once had someone submit 14 pages. I like the breakout column on the right, being able to highlight your skills. As somebody who isn't technical, I'm given a list of, we're looking for somebody who is experienced in Salesforce, who codes in these languages. So having something like that off the bat is really helpful. Don't make me dig for that, I guess. I really like in your work experience that you're highlighting the impact that your work had, not just the tasks that you did, but you're saying like it achieved a 10% boost in optimal efficiency, giving numbers, stats, showing that the work you did was not just your butt in the seat, but like you had an impact on the job you were doing. And then I also like that you have down below under other, some of the other things that you've worked on. Always love seeing continued learning, micro credentials, stuff like that. For some critical stuff, I would say, what did I have? I have notes here if you see me like looking like this. The part at the top where you're saying like full stack developer. I'd love to see a little bit more like highlights. Like, what are the things you're most proud of? What are the things that like make you stand out? So in lieu of a cover page, which is sort of, some people love them, some people don't. Some companies specifically ask for them. I like having, that area right there. I like having something up there that like, why you? Why should I read further? How does what you're doing relate to the job that I'm looking for? This is where you can show that you've done some research in the company, that you think that your skills are applicable and transferable because of what you put there in red. And so I always find that really helpful. It just shows that you've researched the role in the company. You're not just spraying and praying with your resumes, that somebody looks at it, that you've actually put some like attention and thought into it. I also have, don't be afraid to show a little bit of personality. Definitely not anything crazy. I'm not looking for like crazy things, but like when you're looking at hundreds of these, like what makes this person a person? that you want to work with, that you think is going to fit with the team, that like is passionate about what they do, is like all the tasks and all the skills sometimes you're stacking up against people that have similar, what's going to make you stand out. Yeah, so I also have like references question mark. I don't know other people's thoughts on, because some of the resumes I got had references, others didn't. Sometimes you can do the references available upon request. I sometimes like seeing them because it shows like who have you worked with in the past that it, like will give you a thumbs up. And at St. John's, at least it's a small world. We know each other. Be like, oh, I know if so and so puts their name on that person, that they're like a person. Doesn't apply to everyone in every case, but just the thought. Those are my notes.
Great, Elyse. And maybe we can use that as a launching off point to bring Tessa and Ellie into the conversation. How do you folks feel about putting references on the actual resume itself?
I think Elise's point is actually really interesting. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. For me, I don't really look for references on a resume because I'm not at that point yet, right? That's something that is like usually the last stage in the journey. And I usually like to I like to ask so people know that I'm going to contact their references. And then I also like to I like to have at least one coworker and a supervisor, and sometimes I want them from specific places. So often I'm looking for something specific. I don't think it's a bad thing, but sometimes I think it can like burn up valuable space. So like I totally,
You're still good. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Something popped up and I was like, did I just get kicked out?
No, you're good.
I thought I got kicked out. I totally agree with your point, Elyse, that like I only have so much attention span to read a resume, and like if something is going to push into 3 pages and like a references is what's pushing it to 3, like I think that could be, released in favor of something that's like a little bit more substantial.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellie, please bring your thoughts into the mix as well.
So I'm going to come at this from a completely, I don't like references being listed on a resume, and I'll tell you why. I like knowing that they're available upon request, but I think that depending on the role you're applying for and depending on the position, you may want to have different people lined up because, okay, that reference would be able to really speak to that ability for me. And on the flip side of St. John's being small, St. John's and Newfoundland in general, and the tech industry in general is small. So I sometimes have fear of like, if I hand a resume over to a manager, that manager knows their buddy that's listed on the resume, and they pick up the phone and call them and say, what was that person like? And we haven't even met with them yet. We haven't interviewed them. So then it's kind of like giving more information than you need to right from the application. And just in terms of personal information being out there and flooded around, in terms of protecting that a little bit, I think, for the references, because I like to Tessa's point about the different people that sometimes you like to hear from, whether it's a coworker or a manager. I think that's really important depending on the role you're interviewing them for. So and agreed on the length. If it's going to push it over into 2 pages or 3, then make it like size 4 available upon request.
Yeah, not an issue with that. And for just a show of hands from the folks, the panelists here today, the ideal length for resume: 1 pages, 2 pages, or more? So one is the ideal, getting down to those core points. I think that's something good to hammer home. Elyse?
Yeah, or 2. Like I'll do 2 because it's if the stuff you're showing me is good, but page 1 has to like catch me. Like I have to see why I want to keep reading. Otherwise.
And that was your point about differentiation too, including a bit of your personality in there so that your resume does stand out from the other resumes in the pile. Yeah, absolutely. And now there's something that I want to address very upfront at the very beginning. We've already had 2 questions about ATS. which is a big term in the recruitment space. And funnily enough, it's typically, for our listeners out there, a bigger term from the job seeker's perspective than from the recruiter's perspective, very frequently. So for those who aren't aware, ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System or Applicant Tracking Software. And they are tools used by companies, small, large, tech, non-tech, to handle people applying to positions. And so what those systems can do is they can help recruiters and HR folks filter, organize, and select candidates for specific roles. The questions you received include, does this column resume make it through the ATS? So I imagine they're talking about this resume, which has 2 columns of information. And then another question, how many companies, especially low to mid-sized, use ATS? So I was wondering, maybe we could just have a brief sort of sidebar about applicant tracking systems and how you've seen them used in tech in your experience. Panelists. Tessa, you go first.
Yeah, so we used an ATS when I worked at Bench where I was before CoLab. We used Greenhouse. Sometimes I feel like there's a misconception that there's like application questions and they're designed to like screen you out. And that's definitely not always the case. I know that myself, everybody's different. But even if I have like yes, no questions, like I don't have a bucket of where people, if someone says no, then they go into a bucket and I never see their application. That's never the case for me. And we do use a smaller ATS at CoLab called Humi, which is kind of like a little bit more bare bones. But I find it's just a tool to help me be able to see everybody's resume in the best way possible. And even if it's, again, like I don't use those buckets of like, okay, you entered no to this question, you're going right into a no bucket. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, Tessa. And I think that's very important to know. Elyse, more info.
We are just implementing Bamboo HR, which has the applicant tracking as part of it. We have not sent anyone through it yet, so our next hire will go through it, and I'm excited to do it. I have no plans on again making these buckets where people just go to disappear. The only time that I've just discounted someone off of a yes or no question is if we are looking for a very specific, like our platform is built on top of Salesforce. We were looking for Salesforce developers. And if they had no Salesforce experience, especially as a senior role, I wasn't going to look at them. So it has to be pretty specific for me to just be like, nope, or have a system that would take them out.
Yeah, and I find that applicant tracking systems are like a tool for recruiters to give positive candidate experience so that we don't forget to get back to anybody or we don't forget to move someone forward. Like that's more so the tool that I use it for. And I'm sure Elyse and Ellie are the same. Like it's more so that you're providing a good candidate experience to people and getting back to them in an appropriate time.
And I've seen a couple of questions come in the chat about, is it better to stick to than just like a basic resume? And I think Elyse and Tessa may have had a different experience with this, but the ATS in my experience has never made it so that I don't see the resume. It may have questions up front that, okay, yes, no, or list your years of experience or what have you, but at no point in the recruitment process do I not see the resume. So while exactly like what Tessa said, it might help with moving the process along and help organize things. The resume is still a really big part of that recruitment and application piece because that is really what you refer, and it's for me anyways, it's what I send to our hiring managers to say, look, this person looks great. I think, based on XYZ, we should really consider them for an interview. And so, I wouldn't say no, revert back to a really basic, keyword type resume so that I can get into the ATS because your resume will be reviewed at some point. Whether that changes with all of this AI-based recruitment, I don't know. But for now, that is what's still happening, at least with us.
And that's what we've heard. Thank you, Ellie, and everyone for your thoughts on that. That's what we've heard across the local sector. Is there is no sort of AI-based or automated filtering of candidate applications. These recruiters are seeing your resumes when you submit them. So it's not a robot filtering you out because it couldn't read the words on your PDF. I think the biggest recommendation there is if you're worried about file formats, do not submit it as a Word document and do not submit it as a PNG. If it's a PDF, then automated systems are able to read the text that's on your screen. So those are all really good questions. Let's keep things moving along. Let's jump into resume number 2, which had Ellie as the lead. And then while we're here, maybe we can address Mary's question. But Ellie, I'd like your thoughts first. So please take us through what you saw from this heavily redacted resume, what you liked and what you didn't.
Sure. So same as Elyse, I have my notes over here on this screen. So if you see me looking over there, that's why. But the things I really liked about this was this resume was that, yeah, recruiters are very busy. I think that goes across the board with anyone who is doing any recruitment. So the shorter, the better, in my opinion. So I loved how this one was 1 page. Yeah, 1 to 2 pages is really, all you need. I have seen ones that are very, very long, and I've had feedback from hiring managers to say, like, don't send me these because I don't have time to review them. Or can you do a 1-page summary on this resume because it's too long for me to read? And then it's putting more work on the person reviewing resume. So you want to make it as easily accessible as possible. I really liked the quick links up top. I just thought that was a really good way to do it, just in 1 line. So here's, a link to my LinkedIn and whatnot, so that it makes it really easy for the recruiter if they want to take that next step. It's right there. Even just something as simple as the way that that's formatted. So having all of those things in 1 line versus having like 6 lines taken up with links and contact information, just having it straight across 1 line, then you have lots of room to add in other important information. A few things that when I was critiquing it, so I like Elyse, I love that maybe statement at the top, why you? So, what makes you human? What makes you you? What makes you stand out? And it doesn't have to be anything like super over the top, or just some general information about a summary about you. That's 1 line, or your goal with, or your goal with.
We have someone unmuted. Yeah. So if that person could mute, or if one of our moderators could mute that person, that would be fantastic. All right, Ellie, keep going.
Okay. The project section, projects is a really, really common section. I find a lot, something different from like my past days in terms of in tech. It's very common to see a project section, which I think is very unique to the tech industry. My only bit of feedback on the project section is maybe a little bit more information about, were these personal projects? Were these projects related to a specific post-secondary program you did? Was this something that you did on your weekend because you were super passionate about it? Did you work with a large team on this particular project? So just a little bit more context about what that specific project is or what its desired outcome would be. So I was working on this as part of a volunteering program I was doing with Big Sisters, Big Brothers Canada, or it just a little bit more context about what it is that you're working on, because that can change a lot in terms of, okay, this was I'm so passionate about this one thing that I dove into it and developed this project on it. I think that can also demonstrate who you are as a person, your passions, your likes, your personality. So adding as much context as possible for that is great. The other thing I noticed on this resume was we got into the references chat, but there wasn't any reference to any references, which I don't think that's like a deal breaker or anything, but maybe considering adding a one-liner that you do have them available upon request if needed. And then the one other thing that I noted was instead of listing, if we could just scroll back up a little bit, instead of listing the actual job duties of a position, consider listing the skills and the transferable skills for the role that you're applying for that you learned because of these duties. Because a lot of times, you know, if you're looking at descriptions of roles, we can kind of assume what you did as a teaching assistant, but then really that taking that extra step for the recruiter of, okay, I did this, which will make me really good at that in your organization. And knowing the job ad and knowing what the person is looking for, the company is looking for, sorry, in that, and that you've taken that extra step to say, based on this job ad, I think this is why I'm the best fit for it because of these roles that I held. So one example that I had was, I think it was listed here, collaborated with developers and project personnel was the very first duty under this position. And so something that I had said was maybe instead of saying that, say, I had such effective cross-team communication, which further developed my adaptability, my problem-solving skills, my teamwork skills, and I'm really, really good at fostering positive relationships cross-functionally across teams. That to me says so much more than collaborated with developers and project personnel. And I would think to myself, okay, I'm in this role, they need to be able to talk to a lot of different teams and get things done. So just considering switching instead of just duties to what are the transferable skills that I learned from that specific duty.
I love that, Ellie. Not just what they did, but what they now know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And I really liked your feedback also about the project side of things. So saying whether that was part of a team or not, just the kind of what the function of it was, because that can be really helpful. And it does speak to Mary's question from earlier, are we supposed to list projects under sort of an experience section or under a separate section? And so here it's divided into two sections, but I mean, maybe it works either way. Do you have thoughts on that?
I think it kind of works either way, depending. I've seen projects listed separately, say under a specific education, like, okay, these projects are what I focused on during my undergrad. And then projects that I worked on a personal level when I was in this particular position, but that can also get a bit messy when you're reading the resume. So yeah, I think as long as a little bit of context is provided and the projects that you've worked on are listed there, and it's described whether it was like something, you know, that you did in your own time or as part of a team or part of a group at school or what have you.
Okay, amazing. Elyse, Tessa, any thoughts on this one before we keep things moving along?
One thing I wanted to say is I really like skills sections. Like I like that this person has pulled out like the specific languages that they have experience with. And one thing that I would maybe suggest is like moving that to the top instead of at the bottom, because similar to how Elyse and Ellie like the kind of like a highlight section, like that's kind of like almost like its own little highlight section in terms of what languages this person knows. So I really like that section and I would put it like closer to the top. And then I also like how this person has included their the languages they worked on in the projects, like it says the project and then what languages they worked on for that project. So I liked that as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a really good point to make. And again, it addresses, we have so many questions in the chat. I'm excited. I'll pepper these throughout the session. But how are you feeling, Elyse? Do you have thoughts or do you want to jump into the next one from Tessa?
You can jump into the next one. Tessa said my main feedback.
Let's do it. That's perfect. And I just want to say, if you are here and your resume is being reviewed, thank you so much. Again, the session could not happen without you. And we received some really great ones. So with that said, Tessa, let's dive into this. I'll loop some questions in, but get your feedback out there first. What did you like and what can be improved?
Awesome. And same thing as Elyse and Ellie, I took notes. So if you see me looking down, it's just because I'm remembering my notes. But the first thing that I noticed about this one is it's too long in a couple of different ways. So it's 3 pages long, which is a lot for a recruiter to read when you think about like we at CoLab just posted a role and immediately got like 90 applications. If every single person has like a 3+ page resume, like it's going to take me a really long time to like read it and, you know, even be able to stay focused and get through them all. So I do think it's too long. And then there's also like quite a bit of information contained within this resume that maybe not all of it is super necessary. So one thing that I know we've kind of talked about is like highlights of qualifications. I think that like a 1 or 2 sentence highlight piece is fine. But I find this one is a little bit too long. So it says like versatile experience as product manager, aerospace engineer, robotic engineer, and engineering instructor. We can see that in the work experience, right? So I feel like it's a little bit redundant to kind of list it twice. And especially where it's a 3-page resume, like I think that we could make some concessions in what we do include. So I did like the education section. I liked that it had like, you know, PhD, Master of Science, Bachelor of Engineering. I liked that it included the scholarships that this person has won. I thought that that was like a kind of a nice way to include it. Sometimes I've seen them been pulled out as like an award section. I actually kind of like to see them in the education section itself, because you could see what scholarship they won for each degree. So I really liked that. I didn't think including GPA was super necessary. It's not a bad thing to have, but just where this is a little bit longer, just kind of looking at where we can cut down, that might be something to cut out. I really liked the work experience tab. Something that we talked about in our HR peer group was kind of having a short, like 1-sentence blurb on like what the company is. So this says like business development fellow, lab to market. Like and I think that might be like there might be a redacted company there. A lot of the companies we are familiar with, but there are many startups that we don't know. So just kind of sharing like, is that a SaaS organization? Was it a university? Like just giving that little bit of context is something that I find helpful, because otherwise I've got to go and Google it myself. And that's just like another step. And you want to make it as easy as possible for the person that's reviewing your resume. So I always like to have that. There's quite a lot of information in this resume, like the bullets are long. So I would maybe look at like cutting that down a little bit. And similar to what Ellie had said, like a guest lecturer and teaching assistant, like we can kind of get from the title what that person does. So being able to talk about the transferable skills or like the impact that you had, that would be like perhaps a little bit more beneficial to the person reading your resume. If we can scroll down to, yes, perfect. Thank you. Again, there's just like so much information, like the research experience and the publications, like it's all just kind of like a lot to digest on top of like a really detailed work experience blurb. I know like publications are really cool, and could be very beneficial, but it's just kind of a lot with the research experience and the publications and the work experience. And then this like professional training and memberships. For the memberships, some of them say 2023, some of them say 2022. It's hard to tell like, okay, did you have this? And then it's since lapsed, or do you still currently have that? And that's the year when it was completed. I think for training and memberships, it's really only relevant to include what you currently have. So to me, like the way that I would read this is that this person is a member of the Canadian Engineering Association, but they did like they were a member of the business communications for researchers like Dalhousie 2022. Like it's not clear to me if that's like a certification or like a course that they did, things like that. It just kind of feels like this page is a little bit busy, and there's like a lot of information to take in that like may not necessarily be relevant to the role. So I would like definitely look at cutting some of those down. There's one more page. Yes, so in terms of skills, I really like when people include their technical skills. So like this person has listed their CAD software, their programming languages. I find all of that really helpful. But soft skills, not as much. Just my preference. It's a little bit more subjective in that way. And a lot of people will say like organization, time management, things like that. I usually like to have like a conversation about them. And again, this resume is really long, so that's probably something that this person could cut out. Similar kind of story to community and leadership. Like it's just like it's a lot of information jammed into 3 pages. So I think that it could really be cut down. Maybe a little bit of a different take from Ellie and Elyse. References available upon request. I don't find that like adds a ton to a resume. Like it doesn't tell me a ton of information. Pretty much everybody at this stage in the game like understands that they're going to need to have references and provide them if they are going to get a job. So I just kind of feel like it's like one of those standard things that everybody is going to have some sort of references, and like we'll have a conversation about that when we get to that stage. So I'm not like, oh, this is a knock against if somebody includes it, but it's just not something that I'm looking for.
Amazing, Tessa. And this is our first 3-page resume, so you folks can see how much more there is to chat about already when a resume gets this length. And this is maybe a resume that's not quite as software development focused. Someone has research, publications, and GPA. That can all be valuable for some jobs, but maybe not for every job, as Tessa mentioned. One of the questions from the chat that I'll loop in now is someone mentioned, would the cover letter be a better place to include why me? A why me section, so more personality based. And I'll increase that question to scope out a bit of everything. Do you think a cover letter is a place to put information that you want someone to read, but you don't want to put on your resume?
This may be a bit of a hot take, but I kind of feel like cover letter is the absolute last thing that I will read. I often do not read them. We use application questions and we ask kind of like more in-depth questions. Like one of ours is, tell us something that you're really proud of. Why do you want to work at CoLab? So I put more weight into those than per se a cover letter. I find cover letters have gotten really prescriptive in what people will talk about, and they'll kind of say like, I am interested in X job at X company. I gained X skills doing X job at X company. Like this is how it relates to you. It's just gotten a little prescriptive. So like I likely will not read them. And in fact, I almost sometimes feel like it works against people because it's another place where people can kind of like make a mistake. So you'll see someone like addressing a cover letter to the wrong company or things like that. And like, if I see something like that, it's kind of an automatic screen out because there's only so much time in the day. You kind of have to have some check boxes to screen things out. And so if I see a cover letter addressed to another company, it's like an automatic, I'm moving on. So I feel like it's kind of like another place to like make a mistake in a way.
Yeah, fair. The longer the race, the more there's to trip on. While Ellie gives her thoughts there too, let's throw up resume number 4, if we could, Madison. So Ellie, go ahead. Cover letters, thoughts?
Don't like them. Don't like them. I feel like they have been going out for a little while now, and the time it takes to read them, B, exactly what Tessa said. Like I honestly have screened out more people with a cover letter than without because they make errors in them. If you're applying for a super detail oriented position and you put the wrong company that you're addressing in your cover letter, you've just demonstrated to me that you don't really have that intense skill of attention to detail because you messed up the very first thing I'm seeing from you. So Yeah, I don't, specific positions, I think they can be valuable, but I'm more a fan of, work samples for specific roles, or if they make it to, a certain level of the recruitment process. Even we're exploring intro videos as part of your application process, and that's been going super well, because I think you can get a lot more out of like a very quick 1 minute, hey, this is who I am. And it makes it like it makes the recruitment process a little bit more fun too, because you're seeing the person's face and you're getting to know a little bit about them on a personal level and what excites them and makes them them. So yeah, I think that the cover letter is slowly dying, but that may also, I agree with Tessa, like some HR people may like completely disagree with us on that, but that's my take.
We did hear from the majority of the HR leaders in tech in Newfoundland and Labrador that the cover letter is not as important to them as the resume or LinkedIn, really. So, it'll go resume first, then LinkedIn, and maybe in there the prescriptive questions asked by the company, and only after 3 or 4 different locations would they check the cover letter. But I'm really glad we chatted about that. There's lots more things for us to chat about. Ellie, what are your thoughts on this resume number 4?
So the first couple of things that stood out to me was that, again, it's nice and short, although I do think that it could be a little bit shorter. And I did like that there was some differences in terms of formatting, in terms of like color and the reading panel on the side. Although I think in some ways it could be even amped up a little bit to be even a bit more visually appealing if it was reformatted in certain ways. But I did like those aspects of it. I think Tessa mentioned this, forgive me if it was Elyse, but I think Tessa mentioned when you're applying for positions, having like I've said before, recruiters are busy. So the most important thing that you want to stand out about yourself at the very beginning. I find a lot of people will put their work experience at the very top, and sometimes that's not always the most relevant because they don't have that much experience, or they're trying to switch into a completely new industry. So it may not be as relevant as maybe some of their projects that they've worked on or skills that they've developed. So just really looking at your resume from a critical eye, and sometimes that depends on the position you're applying for. Maybe you have a ton of experience that is very, very related to the position. Put that first. Maybe you don't really have that much experience related to the position. Focus on your skills, focus on the transferable skills, and put that right up top. So I think having different versions of your resume can be really beneficial too when you're applying for a lot of different positions. Another thing that I commented on with this resume, if we could just scroll down a little bit, was focusing on relevancy. So what is relevant? So having this large of a section to say that you did general studies for a few months may not be as relevant. Maybe in your interview, you can talk about, I started off doing general studies and then I transitioned into an instrumentation and controls program the following year. Is that really going to get you the job by having that listed? I don't personally think so. So maybe removing that, as well as the high school diploma. So again, could be a hot take. I don't really think it's necessary to put into an application or a resume that you graduated from high school. I think that's obvious when you go on to do other post-secondary education that you do have that high school diploma. So it's just a space eater at that point. And also this, I don't know, this might be a bit controversial, but it also shows how old you are typically. So, and I like having absolutely no idea and no opportunity for any hiring manager to have any sort of bias whatsoever, because we can say as much as we want that we have a completely fair and equitable hiring process, which we do, that I'm very proud of. However, when it gets into the hands of some of the hiring managers, they may look at that and say, well, they're only this age, or they're already this age, or I've seen it actually more so sometimes when I was back in the construction industry on the other end, that people would include their high school diploma from 1955, and then suddenly the hiring manager would have a different opinion. So I think removing it is maybe something for people to consider. The other thing that I wanted to comment on with this was the experience section. If we could just go up there. Yes. So I'm of two minds about experience sections being listed this way, because there is no additional information given about the position. So even just having one line, so whether that's the skills you learned, the duties held, listed in one line, and a couple of skills, it's just, there's really not much meat there to look at in terms of what was done in that role. Even if it's about I'm sure the company has been redacted, but even a little blurb on what the company does, like Tessa said, and then a little blurb on what you were responsible for would be excellent, just to have a little bit. I think the space is there to do that. So just having a little bit more context of the role. And the other thing that I commented on was the skills section. So love that the skills are listed there right at the top. I think that's great. But maybe having some differentiation between whether they're technical skills or soft skills, and maybe just a little bit of, just for ease of reading, a little bit of intro in terms of, having those separated out between technical and soft. I think I have some other things, but we already chatted about them, so I think we're good there.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, definitely some spacing on this one that could be made a bit tighter if you wanted to make it one page or not. And Ellie, a lot of really good feedback here, especially that I like about putting some more information to the top, more important or relevant information right at the top.
I was going to say about the soft skills versus technical skills. I saw in the chat there was about soft skills and whether or not to list them. I kind of feel like anyone can say I'm hardworking, I'm honest. It's that will more come out when we get to know you, when we talk to you, when we talk to your references. Skills for me, when I'm looking at them, are like actual coding languages, actual certificates, actual hard and fast things that like someone has to work and build on. Yes, you do for communication and all that, but that comes out in other ways, I think. So save your space. When people say I'm honest and hardworking, which is great, I hope you are, that needs to be proven, I guess, more so than listed.
Thank you for addressing that question there, Elyse. I completely agree with what you said. And I think Tessa made a great point earlier about how rather than saying just what you did in a position, if you talk about the skills you gained in that position, you can give a bit of proof about how you are a hard worker, or you are able to do teamwork, or schedule things, or be collaborative. Just saying it in your soft skills list does not provide as much to a recruiter as listing it in a bullet point, combining it with something that you did, or saying it in an interview. So I completely agree there. Maybe we can get Ellie's next resume 5 up on the screen while we address another one. There's a lot of questions in the chat, which I'm loving, and some very specific ones. Maybe we can get into those later. But how about buzzwords? As we're getting into this this resume, someone asked, what are your thoughts on buzzwords, from Ali Reza? Do you folks have any thoughts on those in general?
I hate buzzwords.
Is there one that's really...
I think there's a difference. Like some buzzwords are like actual skills that people have and might be necessary to be listed on a resume, but just kind of saying different things for the sake of it being a buzzword, it just can feel a little cheesy to me.
All right. So I shouldn't put synergistic in my skills list. No? Okay. I'll keep that off there.
I agree with that thing about buzzwords. Like if you're going to say it, it has to be applicable. Like if you're working at a SaaS B2B company, I want to know that. But if you're just saying buzzwords for the sake, like you can see it a mile away. I also don't like when things are too like, I worked really hard, or I like using flowery language. It's, sometimes I've seen it take a really simple task and duty, which is still an important thing, and they've put fancy flowery language around it to make it sound really crazy. So like, don't worry about that. Just say what you did.
Agreed. Okay, Ellie, let's get into this resume here.
Okay, so this one here, this some of it may be redundant because I've already said it in past ones, but just taking up that many lines at the very beginning for contact information and things like that. Like I think that there's a much, like with the phone and email and LinkedIn links, you can make that a lot one line or very small up in the top right corner. There's ways to format your resume so that it's just you give yourself more space to focus on more important. Overall with this resume, I think formatting and just general personality, I love it when I open up a resume and I feel like I can already know what someone is like because of how the resume looks, whether it's is there space for humor? Yeah, like whether there's something humorous or whether it's you use a lot of color, or if you're applying for a design or a web design position with us, that your resume is so pretty that I want to put it on our website. So really focusing on making your resume stand out, because when I first opened this one, I thought, okay, the information is here. How can we make this information more fun, more interactive, prettier to the eye, and just overall make you stand out? Because like Tessa said, job was just posted, 90 applications came in. So how are you standing out amongst those 90 applications? And your resume can be a really, really good way to do that. You don't necessarily have all of the skills or what have you, but wow, I remember that name in that resume because it really stood out visually to me. The other thing I know I already talked about this, but just in terms of having the most relevant information up top. So we know that there's, I remember learning in school, you start with your education, you move on to your work experience, you list your references. Like I remember learning that in career class in high school, but I think kind of breaking out of that box and putting things right up top that are super, super important is really, really crucial. So yes, while I would agree that software development, if you're applying for a development position, that's really important. Perhaps the auto body technician or the high school diploma, not as relevant to the role. Maybe that'll come out, through the interview process or even in another section of your resume that you have that experience. Awards and certifications. This is an interesting one because I've seen awards and certifications sections that are massive. Like they list every single award or, diploma or certificate or whatever they have received from the very beginning of their life until. I would encourage people to focus on what is relevant for this role. So am I going to need first aid as a web design person with Carnegie Learning? Nah, you're not, unless it's listed on the job ad. So taking up a full line to state that you have a first aid certificate. Now, when I was working in the construction industry, if you didn't have first aid, you were automatically out. So thinking about the actual role that you're applying for demonstrates that you've taken the time. You've taken the time to consider what you're actually applying for and what's going to be needed in that role. And that right there demonstrates to the recruiter, they put time into this and they're serious about this application. So I think just really focusing on things that are relevant. So, maybe removing things that are not going to be relevant for that role. Listing the current programming skills there in that way, while I liked seeing all of them there, it was difficult to read, I'll be honest. Just the way that they're listed without much context. And like, are you an expert in all of these, or are you like starting to dabble in one and an expert in another? Trying to figure out some way to differentiate that, I think, would be really valuable. And just maybe having, ones that you're really, really passionate about, really, really good at, maybe up top and ones that you're dabbling in or working in a little bit further down. So just considering how that reads to someone who doesn't know you, and having a little bit of context around that. If we go down a little bit, I really liked how the work experience section was on this one, because instead of the duties listed as bullet points, it was more of like a 1 to 2 to maybe 3 lines about each position, which I think read really, really well. It was nice to just kind of read down through and get a quick blurb on each role. Again, the consideration, something to consider would be focusing on skills versus duties, but I think this read really, really well, and was just clean and easy to understand. So I definitely think that's great. Now, the one thing I will say was, if you're applying for, so it looks like this person has made the transition from being someone who works in the auto body technician industry and, into general labor and then into a junior dev role. If you are applying for positions that are development and software based within the tech industry, you maybe don't need to put in the summary of positions for the general labor auto body technician. Save that space, have it there that, okay, yes, I did this for these years, but save that space for expanding on what's really relevant for the tech industry. So just getting smart with how things are laid out so that you can maximize the 1 to 2 pages to be, the most relevant information for what you're applying for. I think that was everything for this one. Yeah, that was everything.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. And I mean, we're addressing so many things. I've really liked your points about, again, restructuring the space to make it more specific. That addresses Mary's most recent question. Is there a hard and fast rule about how many skills listed on the resume? I don't think so. It's just about what's relevant and how you organize them to keep things simple and organized. Elyse and Tessa, any thoughts on this one before we keep moving? No? Okay, awesome. Well, our next one's actually for Elyse, resume 6, I believe. So we can jump into that one. And again, there's lots more questions. We'll get into most of these at the end. Mary also asked, do resumes need a professional summary? I think we've got, the professional summary is more your highlights and qualifications. So Elyse, would love your feedback on this resume in that section.
Okay. I personally do like a highlights and qualifications. This one is a little long, and I have to sort of dig through it to be like, okay, yep. So if it was a little shorter, I've personally even used ChatGPT and been like, take this block of text, make it shorter, make it more concise, and it will just do it for you. Maybe not put your personal information in there, but use with caution and definitely read. Don't just copy and paste, for the love of God. But there's little tricks if you're like, I don't know how to shorten this. Everything's important. Sometimes just having something else be like, what if we just said this? These are the key words based on, AI and our AI overlords. Anyway, so it's a little long, but I do like it there. Very impressive educational background. I mean, I'll give you props for that. And very impressive project section. Where I will say is for projects that's a little further down there, some of them are going back about 8 years. So same with the skills thing that we were just saying, pick and choose which ones are relevant. Tell us why they're relevant to the role that you're picking. This is taking up so much real estate that be like, nope, these are based on the job. These ones I think are the more applicable. And maybe even say how they apply, which is great. The skills are all the way on the bottom of the 3rd page. Bump those right up. All that, your programming languages, all of that, too far. Didn't see it. Language skills, it's cool if you could speak another language. I know you're speaking English if you're applying for this job. If it's applicable to the job that you need to speak French because you have customers in Quebec or something like that, then yeah. But I have never once looked at a IELTS score or a GRE So again, if it's applicable to the role. The references, again, it's a big section. And again, there's no specific role you're applying for, but it looks like they're all academic references. I would, yeah, French for a federal job, exactly. For if this was someone applying to ClearRisk and they only had academic references, I'd be like, what are their work references though? Do they not have anyone that can vouch for them in a day-to-day work experience? That's not research, that's not, yeah. So it can be a double-edged sword that way. If you're gonna put references on there, I like to see some diversity, and maybe it's academic, maybe it's volunteer, maybe it's showing me a bit more sides of yourself. I wrote in the highlight section, at one point it says they know low level and high level skills. I'm going to assume you know the low level if you know the high level. So like, I don't know, just putting low level in your right off the bat, just like, I would get rid of that. And oh yeah, I was just going to say overall, and it depends on the role you're applying for, it's very academic. So it might help to show how the things that you are doing in your academic programs are transferable to the work, like what transferable skills, what impact, what, I'm not in an academic role, I don't know all the ins and outs, so like spell it out for me a little bit about why you'd be a good fit.
I will move them to Turkey and yeah.
Whoever's unmuted, please mute yourself.
Yeah. Those are my main points.
All right, thank you, Elyse.
And it's too long, it's 3 pages.
Yes, yeah. Again, we talked about the 1 to 2 pages as being the ideal. Maybe I can throw a question at you just to get you and Tessa and Ellie talking some more. This was from Swapna a little while ago. While writing a resume, does it make sense to bold keywords? Is that a good practice for something like this highlight section?
I'm not against it, just use it sparingly. Like if everything's bolded, nothing's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question just came through from Chevenu. There's a saying that recruiters spend an average of 7.4 seconds scanning the resume. How true is this in the industry? I'm impressed that there's a saying that gets that specific. I can't say it's an accurate statistic, but for you folks, I don't know if there's a length of time you would say you review a resume for that you'd want to share, but when you're reviewing a resume, what do you typically do?
I don't think there's like a specific amount of time that I'll spend on it, but for example, we're hiring for an account executive now, or if it was a specific software developer role, I would go right to like their most recent experiences and skills and look to see if it's relevant to the job that they've applied for. So for example, we're hiring an account executive role right now. I would go right to the resume, look at the most recent experience and say like, okay, we're looking for enterprise experience. Do they have that? If it was a developer role, like going right to their languages, do they have experience in the languages that we use day to day? Like you do need to kind of have those quick pull triggers, right? So I'll usually go to those first. And if it's like a no based on like a quick scan, then I usually move on to the next. And if it's like, okay, there's something here, then start to read it top to bottom.
Absolutely. And again, another reason why to have important things right at the very top. Include some of those relevant languages you see in the job posting in your highlights section or whatever was important from your projects and whatnot. Yeah. So again, not asking anyone to put a time measure on this, but Elyse and Ellie, would care to share anything about your sort of practice to go along with Tessa's?
I mean, I have not timed myself. I've taken someone out of the running in less than 7 seconds because of something. They didn't meet a qualification. They put, then maybe like they said, the resume or the cover letter, they used the wrong company. Like there's things that'll get you down on the lower end of time. But I guess it is like, do you meet the qualifications? And then what keeps me reading? Like that's some of the stuff that we're saying, like visually appealing, important stuff where it needs to be. because I've qualified someone in that amount of time as well. So it's all about how do you make it quick.
Absolutely. I view it similar to how someone looks at a website. You know, when you visit a website, how long are you looking at that website before you make a decision to scroll or click a button? It's, you know, this is not what we're doing. We're not scrolling and clicking buttons, but you can absorb a page worth of information very quickly, especially when you know what you're looking for. Ellie, anything to add there?
I think that Elyse and Tessa said it all. It's like the initial, for me, a big thing is the initial grab. Like, what is the initial that, okay, that's super, you know, relevant. I'm going to keep looking into this, because like Elyse said, I have looked at resumes and within 5 seconds said no. And it is because I'm going to that, you know, specific skill that I'm looking for, qualification, or, you know, but I do think that I spend more time on the resumes that are really visually appealing and make it fun and easy for me to get the information that I'm looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Design cannot be understated here. Let's jump to resume 7. And looking at the time, this may be the last one we tackle today, just because we've got lots of questions that we can address and we can have more of a general conversation. But Tessa, would love to hear from you about what you liked and didn't on this resume.
Yeah, so one thing that I liked a lot was that this person has, and I've seen it in a couple of other resumes, but they have their GitHub link included in the very top. So for developers, like that's like a direct example of the work that you can and will do if you get the job. So I really like to have the GitHub links if you were in marketing, having like your portfolio or you know, any sort of link to your work that you can show, I find is always super beneficial. So I really like to see that. The skills and languages are kind of bolded here. I thought this was kind of a good way to do it because it's the work experience piece, and then they bolded the languages that they've used within that. So I thought that was a good use of the bold function. Because if you do a quick scan, you can kind of see the languages that they've used, and then go into more detail if you need. If you scroll down a bit, there's an other experience category, I think. Sorry, just go up. Okay, I think I'm maybe referencing the projects piece. A similar kind of feedback to Ellie. I can see the dates here. Not always, okay, no, it does have personal and academic. I did like that, about how it kind of says if it's you know, academic or personal. I do think it is kind of a lot of projects to be listed on a resume, especially when it looks like this person has some really good work experience, some good education. Like you're not necessarily needing to like fill up the space. So I did like that it was included, but I think that it could probably be a little bit shorter. I like that there's a bit of color around the resume, like the blue is a nice little pop. I think pretty much every resume we've seen has been black and white, and not that there's anything wrong with a black and white resume, but when you see 90 black and white resumes in a row, it can get a little bit, you know, they all start to blend together at some point. So I find when I see a resume that has a bit of a different format or like different color blocks or things like that, nothing crazy, I just find it a little bit more exciting to read. So even this just like little pop of blue just feels like a little bit of personality in here that I really like. I really like that it's one page. I really like the skills section, but again, I think that we could probably move that to the top of the page. And then if we could just go up to the experience page again. Yeah, I liked I thought the summaries were good. Again, potentially a little bit long, but nothing really crazy. Like it's one page. This is a good length.
Awesome. Thank you, Tessa. Yeah, I think I agree with everything that you said there. Elyse and Ellie, any feedback on this resume as well? No? Okay, cool. Well, okay, there were two more resumes there that we had the chance to get through. So maybe if we could just throw them up and then in just 30 seconds, Tessa, you could say what you liked about this one and then Elyse could say about the last one. So Tessa, this was your last one. Just
Okay.
super quick thoughts. What did you like about this one?
Yeah, so I liked that this one has the GitHub link again. The summary here looks like a good kind of short little highlight. So if that's something you want to include, then that would be like a good length to do. Again, I like that the skills are close to the top with the languages listed. Again, it's a little bit like black and white. Don't love like the formatting, and it feels a little bit bland. So I think we could add some personality and spice to this resume. I like that the person has like the bullet points are kind of explanations, but I do feel like they are a little bit long. So I think it could either be like one blurb that's 2 or 3 lines, or it could be just a couple of different bullet points that are shorter in length. If we can scroll down. Oh, so this was the one that had the other experience. I don't find that it's super relevant to this job, and it's tipping it over into 2 pages. So I don't think that that's something that really needs to be included. And this was a role that you were only in for a couple of months. So if it was something that, you felt you needed to reference in the interview, then that's totally fine. If you had like an example that you wanted to talk about, then that would be totally fine. But I don't think that you need to put it on the resume because it's not something that's going to make or break. I do like the awards and certifications piece, but I do find like I almost want to see the AWS certified cloud practitioner. Like I know that's something that we really look for at CoLab. So I almost want to see that in a little bit of a different place. Like maybe it's awards and then certifications, or maybe those certifications are put in with your skills. But it's kind of feeling a little bit like best associate of the month with the AWS certified cloud practitioner. It's feeling a little bit like kind of jumbled. So I think they could be pulled out a little bit differently.
Hey, awesome. Completely agreed. Really like that. And it's the very last thing on the resume. Could definitely be above cashier part-time. So thank you, Tessa. Elyse, last resume,
Yes.
rapid fire, 60 seconds. I really wanted to get to this one because I realized we didn't have this one at the end has a bit more of that design sort of energy that we've been talking about. So please, your feedback here.
That was the first note I said was I love the template. It's clean, it's easy to read, it breaks out the things that I want. Like I personally love a good side column. My resume has a side column because I want to be able to highlight those things on the first page and not have them hidden on the last. I like that you pulled out your skills and you can have them listed there. In the flip side of it, like we were talking about GitLab and like there's no links to projects. You have software skills, but like you don't really have the experience there yet, which is fine. But like, what projects have you worked on? What, show me some stuff, I guess. Do overview. Oh, for the overview and highlight, like there's no overview and highlight section. Like, why you is what I want to know a little bit more of. And then in your jobs, you did pull out like I think I can't remember now. I have it over here as well. Do a little bit more about like the impact or the transferable skills, like Ellie had mentioned, would be helpful in a role. I know you don't have a specific role you're applying for right now, so it's all a little hypothetical. And then last but not least, I wrote, be careful of acronyms. You have HMR clerk. I don't know what that is. And so, and maybe under redacted, it makes more sense. I don't know, but there's some acronyms in the tech industry, like HTML, CSS. Yeah, that's the thing. But like, be a little careful, especially when you're in different industries, just dropping acronyms, because again, it's something else I have to then go away and Google and be like, what does that mean? Is that applicable? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for throwing this to Tessa and Ellie, the design of this resume, do you think it's fine? Do you think it's good? Do you think it should be more basic? I think that's something that a lot of folks were interested in on the call.
No, I really like it. My one thing that I will say is, if you're going to go through this much effort to have this like design aspect, just make sure that everything is okay. So just this is how type A I am, and I realize I'm going to come across this way. But like under projects, so say the first bullet point, the first bullet point comes back out underneath the bullet, and then the second one doesn't. So just those little things to just make it look like super extra sharp, because you've gone through such an effort to make this be this attractive visually. Then just go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that there's no other and then again with like projects being over on on the left and education and skills being in the center, just little things like that. They do make a difference. But no, I do think this looks really visually appealing. One thing I've seen it a couple times in the chat, so if it's okay, can I just address one thing?
Please, yes, go ahead.
A couple people have asked about, would you rather have employment gaps and take out roles that aren't relevant? And I think there's a really easy way to do this, is that if you do have a position that's not as relevant, one line, it can be even like a smaller font, just one line that I worked here from 2020 to 2021, but no additional information. And if the interviewer or if the recruiter or whoever is hiring is really interested in that specific role, they can ask. But focusing on roles that, because I know what you mean about having, well, I'm going to take out 5 years of work experience because that position isn't relevant to this one. Just being really, really mindful of your resume in terms of getting the spacing down so that the information's there, but you're not expanding on things with all this immense detail that isn't as relevant. So I just wanted to address that because I saw that come up a couple of times in the chat.
Yeah, that was a great question by Devin. And I think now's a great time to just jump into the Q&A. So we can stop sharing the slides. I can stop doing my little annotations. People saw those, right? That wasn't just me. You could, okay, thank God. I was just drawn in there the whole
Liam's
time.
just like,
yeah, having the time of my life. Yeah, absolutely. And that was a great question, Ellie. I think there was also some questions in here. People were asking about, could we see resumes from new graduates? And I'm seeing questions down at the bottom that say, what if you don't have any relevant work experience yet? So if we're thinking about new graduates and their resumes, do you have any specific pieces of advice? Because I'm pretty sure we saw some new grad resumes in there anyway. But does anyone have any advice for them specifically?
Yeah, I think that would be one of those situations where I think it was my first resume. There was like publications, I think like community experience, different things like that. That could be the place to include that and like go into detail on the projects that you worked on in school, the skills that you have, you know, any certifications or workshops or different things that you did like that. I think that could be a really good place to include it and maybe, you know, use it to beef things up a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tessa. And I think that people that don't have a lot of experience or they're new grads, they actually even have a bigger and better opportunity to put personality into their resume. I sometimes think that people can be held back a little bit by that if they do have 25 years of work experience, because they're trying to fit all these roles into their resume. So people that are new grads, people that are trying to switch industries, people that, you know, maybe don't have as much relevant experience, you actually can look at it in a way that, wow, how can I flesh out this resume to like really express who I am? So even if it's a project you worked on in school with a group, like explain how you were integral in that group and what that project was. And I think that anything that you can apply that is relevant to you as a human being in this role, volunteering, anything to do with the community, anything that you've done, even in if you don't have that much experience in post-secondary yet, or you know, you're just trying to figure it out, you're a high school grad, things that you did in high school that might be, were you on a student council, were you a part of any sort of, you know, planning groups, planning committees for your grad, were you anything like that that can be demonstrate to the recruiter, this is who this person is. I think all of that is so relevant at that time. And you may not feel that, oh, I don't want to put that on a resume when I'm applying for, put it on there, because you're looking for the ability to flush it out and for people to get to know you. And I think that that can be really valuable when you don't maybe have that experience yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a junior position, if all the resumes look the same, it's harder to be picked out of that crowd, especially at the junior level. Elyse, any more thoughts?
I was just going to say, like I've seen in a past role, I looked at a lot of intern, like student co-op position resumes, and still do from time to time. And sometimes it gets locked into a format. I don't know if it's the faculty that's pushing it, but it's just like I've got the same resume with the same same cover letter with the same resume format, and there's no personality, and it's just everything thrown at the wall, hoping something will stick. And it's, yeah, bring some personality, bring some tailoredness to it to show you've thought about the job in the company and you've thought about your skills and you've written something for it.
Yeah, agreed. And here's the other hand, if you can get anyone near you, anyone you're connected with on LinkedIn to give you feedback on your resume, that's great. If your resume is 4 to 5 pages, it is a bigger ask for someone to review your resume than if it's 1. So always remember that the shorter your resume is, the more feedback you can receive. And so now that we enter the Q&A period, I wanted to throw one of the more difficult questions I saw in the chat at you folks, because it's almost like if you're becoming like a recruiter, if there was like an LSAT for recruiters, this question will be on it. Here it is. If I am an employee at company A and I've been assigned to work in company B as outsource, I have been exposed to the core business of company B, and company B is very famous, assuming more famous than company A. In my resume, should I say I worked for company A or company B? It's from you, Cal, in the chat. Any thoughts, folks?
I would say like you need to say the company that you actually worked for, which would be company A. And then in the bullets or the explanation of the job, then you can say that you were with company B and what you did there and how you were exposed to it, or even talk about that in the interview. But I think that like saying that you worked for company B when you really worked for company A is like a little bit like that's not the truth, and like that will likely come out in a conversation, and then that doesn't feel good to you to have to say it, and it doesn't feel good for the recruiter to have to hear it either.
I agree. Totally. I think the more accurate you can be on your resume, the better, to avoid those exact conversations that Tessa's talking about. There are some other questions in the chat about asking about people's chances of getting into the field and things like that. We'll focus on resumes for today. Someone asked a question that I hear frequently from some folks who I work with. This is from Sarush. I heard that we shouldn't include photos in resumes. Should we?
Yeah, they're not really, like, to be honest, I don't look at a resume and say, oh, wow, I'm so glad their picture is there, because it's just so irrelevant to the role. Maybe if I was, hiring at a modeling agency, I would look for that, but it's not relevant to the position, right? So can it add personality? Certainly, but it's not a deal breaker. I actually loved that last resume that we looked at. I actually loved that it was like almost like a cartoon version of the individual, is what I'm assuming it was, which adds like a little bit of pizzazz to the resume, but it's not like a direct headshot. I thought that was like clever way to do it, because you're kind of crossing the line of, I have a picture there, but it's not really, a selfie I took on my iPhone. So yeah, I if it's there, it's great. But what I will say is, if there is a photo there, make sure it's appropriate. I have actually seen photos on resumes that would shock you. Yeah, they're not appropriate, or they're not relevant, or yeah, so it's your call, but either or, just make sure it's appropriate for a resume.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Ellie. It's not a requirement. Maybe it's definitely not needed, but you folks can choose what you do. As we get further into the Q&A, close to the end of our session today, thank you all for attending. Thank you, panelists, for participating. There's a question from Cher in the chat that I'd like to paraphrase for you folks. We've talked a lot about the skills section and about having something at the top. They mentioned repetition. So in the skills section, you're going to say things that you may also be saying under the bullet points within your work experience. How do you folks feel about that repetition? Is there a way to include it only in one section rather than the other? How do you feel about that, especially on something that's, say, 1 page in length?
I feel like it depends on what you're repeating and how you're doing it. So for example, we spoke about like having a skills section at the beginning where it has pulled out all of the different languages that you understand. And then in the work experience section, it included, or like the project section, it included what languages you use. Like that feels fine to me. But if you're repeating, I don't know, I worked here, here, and here, and then I'm saying it again in a different space, like some things can just feel a little bit repetitory. So I think it just kind of depends on what and how you are doing it.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's what you're repeating. Like exactly what Tessa said. Like if you're putting in your skill section that you're really good at teamwork. And then throughout your work experience, every single position you're saying, I worked as part of a team really well, then it's kind of like, okay, well then maybe you take it out of your skills section and we can see from your positions and focus on skills that are really relevant to the position. I think that is one of the main takeaways from today is customizing it to the role you're applying for, the company you're applying for, what they're looking for, what the role is going to require of you, and taking who you are and what that is and just making a pretty 1 to 2 pager that highlights all of that. I think that's kind of the key. So repetitive or not, just focusing on what you want to show right off the bat to that role.
Yeah, amazing, Ellie. And that addresses actually the last question that we'll address in the chat, which is from Mary again. Do you have any tips for career changers to consider? They mentioned that they have design skills and other previous experiences. I say include the skills if they're relevant to the position, just as you said there, Ellie, right, folks?
100%. I mean, are you doing UI UX? Then yeah, design is great. Are you doing marketing? Obviously design. So yeah, it depends on the skill. And I mean, I'm also somebody that comes from a non-tech background. I worked in theater and film. So it's just about finding those transferable skills and telling your story of how what you did led to where you are and how it's relevant and why that makes you a standout person. And instead of being like, my life started at this point, like you were a full human being, and most of us are pretty open to knowing. And I feel like the world is opening up more to the idea of transferable skills, and having a greater background brings more diversity to thought and design and to the product in general. So don't shy away from it. Maybe learn to craft your story a bit better and figure out what the keywords that people want to hear. But if it's applicable, it's applicable. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. Elyse, Ellie, Tessa, thank you so much. We have 1 minute left. I'm going to throw it to all of you. If you have one final piece of resume advice you'd love to leave everyone with, you can do that now. I know you folks just gave some great closing arguments, but I'll throw it to each of you. So just 10-second final thought for everybody on the call. Tessa, thank you. Do you have a final thought?
I would say maybe like don't take yourself so seriously. Like it's fun, like use it as an opportunity to express yourself and your personality. Don't worry about, of course be appropriate, but don't worry about being so rigid or like a kind of thing.
Yeah, I think all of us in the workplace, you can be professional and you can be fun.
Totally.
Yeah. Thank you, Tessa. Elyse, a final thought?
I wish I had something profound. There's two like small things that sort of came to mind. But one is when you are titling your resume, like I mean the file name, put your name and maybe the job. Don't put clear risk. All resumes are for clear risk. When I'm looking for your resume, like I want to click on the thing that says your name. A small thing, but there it is. And then also with a PDF, if you're saving like a Word document to PDF, always check the PDF. Sometimes it reformats things, things push into pages, and all of a sudden your beautiful 2-page resume is 3 pages. So just double check those things.
Great. Final piece of advice, Elyse and Ellie.
I think just focusing on really what makes you you, because a lot of people are going to apply for the position that have very, very similar experience, work-wise or skill-wise. So focusing on things, and whether that's how it comes across, how you format your resume, whether that comes across in a one-liner, whether that comes across as this cool fun fact that you include at the bottom because you're trying to set yourself apart. Just something that makes you you. And at the end of the day, you know, when you're interviewing people and they have a lot of the same experience, that is what is going to, at the end of the day, help you get a position. So I think just considering that, and like Elyse said, tell your story and be honest. And I think you can't go wrong if you're being honest on an application or a resume.
Absolutely. Be unique, be honest, and be fun, be yourself. There's a lot. Those are some great final thoughts, folks. Thank you for doing that with me. And thank you, Elyse from ClearRisk, Ellie from Carnegie Learning, and Tessa from CoLab for joining us today. I think this was a really great session. Again, maybe next time we do LinkedIn profiles, maybe we do resumes again, whatever you folks are interested in. We'd love to have you back. And I just want to thank all of you folks for joining us and listening today. I think this was a great event, and certainly based on your feedback, it won't be the last. So thank you, everybody. We will see you at our next techNL event.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you.